Welcome back. The Obama administration has tried to reset U.S.-Russian relations, but it seems that the new developments between Presidents Obama and Putin have soured the relationship all over again. And joining me now is Matthew Rojansky, director of the Keenan Institute on Russia at the Wilson Center. Thank you very much for being with us.
Hi, happy to be here.
As the Russians are in town and for a previously scheduled meeting, of course, and the president announced that he's not going to go to Moscow for this meeting with Vladimir Putin. Putin announced yesterday that he has sent a telegram wishing George W. Bush, the other president he worked with a lot more happily, apparently, wishing him well and a good get well from his heart procedure. That certainly seems like he's trying to poke a stick in the eye of this president.
Yeah, it's unfortunate the degree to which this relationship has gone off the rails on what is at least partially a personal story. I think on the one hand, the dynamic between Obama and Putin has never been good. Unfortunately, from his end, Putin is a pretty prickly fellow. He's never going to open up completely. It's just not his style. He doesn't like the sort of hail fellow, well met kind of brusque stuff that American politicians tend to do. And then Obama insists consistently, including most recently on the Leno show, on talking about Putin as this kind of Cold War figure, as a KGB spy. Some of these things may well be true, but they're probably not diplomatically wise. It doesn't put Putin in a friendly frame of mind.
That's just really rubbing it in and making it clear that that the president really took offense. I think that he personally asked Putin to turn Snowden back, and obviously they were on the phone. This was a personal request, and it was ignored and denied.
Yeah, I think the Russians, though, were in a tough position. I think first, the Chinese outplayed both the Russians and the United States by more or less getting exactly what they wanted out of Snowden. They got whatever intel they wanted. They got to make the PR point about, the U.S. has got whistleblowers and human rights and privacy problems, too. And then they dumped the problem off on Moscow's doorstep. And then, because of the way the U.S. Essentially trapped Snowden there, denying him the ability to leave anywhere other than to come back to face trial, the Russians were faced with this very unidimensional choice, right? Either they comply with what Uncle Sam wants to essentially force them to do, which is, hand this guy over to a treason trial, or they come across as the enemy, and unfortunately they chose the latter.
What about the Olympics in Sochi? Because this is something that Americans, all the way up to the commander-in-chief, are really offended by, the LGBT crackdown in Russia. The laws are going to apply to the Olympians themselves. And if they make any protest, even waving a little handkerchief, a rainbow handkerchief, they'll be eliminated. So these athletes have trained for years, some all their lives, for this moment. What should we do?
Yeah, it's a very tough situation. First of all, just remember that law as written in Russia and law as actually enforced can be very different things. I think the Russians' interest is to have a smooth, positive, diplomatically pleasing experience around Sochi to show that they can host a major international gathering without incident. By the way, I think they have the same interest for hosting the G20 next month in St. Petersburg. So I think things will probably go all right. But you're right that almost any opportunity under Russian law as written could be taken. However, I want to point out that I think the idea that the United States ought to make an issue of this now is probably not worth the cost. You've got 145 million Russians who are looking hopefully towards this experience where I think the engagement and the exposure to a diverse international community is probably a very good thing for Russian culture and society. If in the long term you want more tolerance and more inclusiveness, you probably want the event to go forward.
Are you surprised that the president is not expected to even meet with Putin on the margins of the St. Petersburg G20?
It's funny that I think Snowden may have been the provocation for this decision in the very short term, but in the long term, it's not a surprising call. This is a president who is very fortunate to have had essentially a build-up of unresolved issues that he came into office and was able to pretty quickly resolve. So getting the new nuclear treaty done, civilian nuclear cooperation, doing very sensible things on Afghanistan and Iran, and then he encountered the reality of U.S.-Russia relations over the last year and a half, which is that they're not easy. they don't tend to result in very swift returns on investment. And I think, in a sense, he's lost interest. So that's what we're seeing. It's not that he's so personally offended by the decision on Snowden. I think mistakes have been made on both sides on that. I think the real concern is this is a president who doesn't feel that his legacy will continue to be well served by investing more political capital in Russia. That's very worrying to me in the long term.
Matthew Rojansky, really interesting take. Thank you so much. Great to see you.
Thank you.